Hey there, everyone. Eric Cox here with Net Capital, and I'm very excited to be joined by India Hayes and Harold Raymond of Mini-City. If you will just allow one moment for people to go ahead and settle in, and then we will be off to the races. Thank you. Fantastic. Well, welcome again. As I mentioned earlier, I am Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Net Capital team. As always, we're being joined by a company that is actively raising on the Net Capital platform. I will add a direct link into the chat so you can go and check it out, get more information, ask any further questions that you'd like to, and of course, invest. I will also be recording this entire webinar, so please do keep that in mind. But the best webinars are the interactive ones. So please use the Q&A functionality built into Zoom. We want to keep this as interactive as possible. We want to answer the questions that you have that can help you make a sound investment decision. Again, there is a chat function, but Q&A works a lot better, so I can track all the questions and make sure I can get to as many of them as possible. So go ahead and dive right into the Q&A functionality. But while you guys are warming up your fingers and getting ready for Q&A, why don't I hand it over and just learn a little bit more about Mini-City. So India, Harold, whoever wants to take over, why don't you just tell us a quick bit about Mini-City?
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining our webinar. I'm India Hayes, the CEO and co-founder of Mini-City. I'm joined today by my counterpart and brother, Harold Raymond, who's our VP of Business Development. And Mini-City is a tech resource hub that streamlines the admin process to obtain legal forms of identification for the homeless and homeless care providers.
Thank you so much for that. And let's before we go deeper into exactly what Mini-City is and how it works, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, India, and Harold, if you would do the same after, that would be great.
Absolutely. So, as I said before, Harold and I are siblings, and prior to Mini-City, we were heavily invested in community efforts and advocacy. We actually come from a family that works in social impact, so working on women's rights, humanitarian aid overseas as well as domestically. All that stuff really is close to our heart as well as our family's heart. So prior to Mini-City, I was volunteering in women's shelters around Atlanta. That's where we're based, just on helping them get back on their feet, feeling empowered, and any other kind of gaps that they were having. So I'm very community focused. We lead Mini-City with community, and it continues with community. We actually arose from a hackathon that was being hosted by Goody Nation. So they basically hack different social ills across the nation. And Atlanta's call to action was hacking gentrification. So being so heavily invested in community efforts, we really saw a huge need. We knew we wanted to work with the homeless after years of working one-on-one with them. And that's where Mini-City came from, just a community panel that was hosted through tech and other efforts. And, you know, it's something that we are really invested within. So I know our brother can speak to his own accolades and community projects himself, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, India. So my background, like India, is like heavily rooted in social impact, IT, business, and particularly statistics. So I've been working with advocacy organizations like the Conservation Fund, where I focused on environmental health and food disparities within the South, and exploring economic engagement opportunities to promote sustainable practices in these communities. But I really have a lot of experience with like large IT projects and enterprise companies, because before I joined Mini-City, I was working full-time as a consulting engineer with Cisco, and I worked with Google Fiber and their small business team, trying to get smaller organizations, small businesses to use Google tools to better enhance their business. But with our experience and social impact and kind of that big passion for computer science and technical know-how, it really helps us to know like the different pain points of these grassroots organizations and kind of having that technical experience to see and understand how IT and the digital tools can really alleviate some of these bigger issues. And really, we're just committed to all of this, committed to the mission of Minicity and what we're trying to do with different cities and helping out the homeless population.
Oh, thank you, team. It seems like a very strong background for what you're working on now. I know you have another team member, Sarab. Could one of you speak to what he brings to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. So Saurabh Jha is our CFO and another founding member. He is a PhD candidate in his last month at Georgia Tech. That's why he couldn't join us today. Busy wrapping up that PhD, but he's a two-time startup tech founder. His research and tech expertise has been backed by Apple, Intel, the Air Force. I'm probably forgetting a few other science foundations, but a lot of really strong leaders. He also has experience on patenting his different technology and startup efforts, whether it's provisional patents or full patents under Georgia Tech. So he's also a patent holder. He brings a wealth of knowledge in business management and consultancy. So he's been really pivotal in helping us work with the Center for Civic Innovation, helping us launch our first pilot when we first were working with customers. We've grown a lot since then, but he definitely adds a lot of tech background as well as business management acumen.
Oh, fantastic. Rounding out the team with some tech and business. Let's circle back now after discussing that. Let's circle back to big picture. What are the problems that the homeless population are facing? And then we'll kind of start talking about how Minicity is one of those solutions. How big is this problem, homelessness, in the United States?
Yeah, so chronic homelessness is a huge issue in the United States. There's about 500,000 people that are experiencing homelessness on any given night in the United States. And Forbes found that of the chronically homeless, so those are individuals that are experiencing homelessness for decades on end, so not just short periods of time, but long-standing homelessness, it's a huge drain on our cities. There's actually $10 million just in taxpayer dollars alone that's spent addressing the needs of the chronically homeless. So that doesn't get into our total addressable market of all the different issues that kind of funnel into that. But this is a very, very vulnerable population that's often pushed to the fringes of society. And, if you ask someone, okay, how can we help the homeless? They often say, let's give them housing, food, all types of things that definitely can aid in sustainability, but you're not actually able to take those next steps without ID. So 50% of the homeless actually don't have access to legal, legible, valid forms of ID that are not expired. So even if they're in the position to start a new job, get that new apartment or first house, they can't many times due to lack of ID. Another thing that people kind of sometimes overlook is that even a housing program, even shelters can't accept the homeless into their programs without ID sometimes, unless they're what we call a low barrier shelter, which is very costly sometimes for the city or other groups to kind of back because it does have a much lower threshold for whom they welcome. So that's kind of painting, the landscape and where Minicity kind of interacts.
Excuse me. Wow, that's super interesting. So what I'm hearing is there is a large barrier to access to these great services that people are trying to provide to support the homeless population, but without identification, pulling yourself out of homelessness in forms of jobs or housing or even healthcare. This is a big barrier to that one piece of identification.
Yes, absolutely.
And how does Minicity help make the identification process smoother?
Yeah. I feel like I've been talking quite a bit. Harold, do you want to talk a bit about the identification process?
Yeah, definitely. So Minicity, we have a quick mobile application. When anyone comes into one of our partner locations, they can, within 5 to 10 minutes, fill in a series of prompts where we accumulate enough information to generate a user folder and user profile. And that profile, we've done about 6 months of previous research, contacting vital records offices to know the process of getting someone identification or birth record without the need without some of the needs of identity or work history or any of those past things that they may not have. So with that general profile, we generate forms, different or 6 different notary and authorization forms for this user that we use to contact and handle correspondence with the Vital Records Office to deliver a birth record or ID for the user. We also accumulate other information. We get, you have user tracking, user surveys, where we accumulate data points around their experience being homeless and some of the services they do need, like what ID and different resources they have currently, what they need in the future, and other kind of quantitative and qualitative data points about their experience, things they don't have, and they're really just the story it tells.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so we're talking about 500,000 individuals experiencing homelessness any given night in the United States, and that's in the wealthiest nation in the world. This could be a global application, I imagine, but still focusing on the United States for now. We're talking about 40% of those people being women and children. Tell me a little bit more about what are those costs associated from a municipality standpoint. I imagine there are some police costs, there are some emergency room visit costs. So can you walk through the cost implications of the outside of the human dignity part, which is compelling on itself? Let's walk through the financials a bit.
Yeah. In terms of the financials, it's a huge cost. So prior to this webinar, we did a series of webinars that were more public facing on the cost of homelessness, connected cities. You guys can definitely look those up. We encourage you to, but that's something that we really like to look closely at, the cost of this. So of course, it's a human cost. You know, you're losing valuable years, you're unhoused, but in terms of the economy or monetary costs, cities are spending millions and millions of dollars. Let's just take a look at Atlanta, the city that we're based within. There's about $23 million that's spent each year on ER visits. And then on jail stays, there's a huge amount of cost, upwards $10 million and upwards. And then when you get to larger cities, such as LA or cities on the West Coast that have a just as large homeless population, or areas or part of the nation which are definitely seeing a strain in terms of affordable housing, those costs really skyrocket. And so we were looking closely again at LA and the West Coast. They're seeing almost billions, very close to the $1 billion mark in terms of cost of homelessness. When you look at jail stays, ER visits, outpatient visits, and so forth. So this is a really heavy drain on our nation. Atlanta is not as large of a city as some of these other areas, but it's still a huge amount of taxpayer dollars and city dollars that are going towards this.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's. Oh, sorry, Harold. I feel like you're going to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to add to, because you're bringing up costs, but also you think about the cost savings when you're really focusing on helping these populations. You know, seen lots of different examples and great studies, like one particularly out of Connecticut with their community cares team and trying to have a breastfeed care and discharge planning for hospitals. You know, they saved in a cost of annually $2.5 million between each hospital, these 4 hospitals, by diverting a lot of those chronic users, emergency department users that were homeless. These were chronically homeless emergency department people that were consistently coming in, but having a community care team to divert these different siloed partnerships and shelters to get housing to these people, they were able to save millions of dollars annually.
That's a really good point. Two sides of the same coin. Not only are you saving, but you're also not spending. Or I guess it's the same thing, but there's a cost to supporting the system, but then there's a cost to not having to support that system. I think that's a better way to put that. And I do want to walk into, I feel like you have so many different plans. There's so many places to really API into here. And we would definitely get to the data, the banking and different components to that. But let's flash over to the investor focus part for a second here. Let's talk a little about the business model. How does MiniCity make money? You are a for-profit company.
Yeah, we are a for-profit company. We get asked that very often. Many times investors also ask, who can afford this? If you're working with social enterprises, are they even able to afford this? So we do charge an annual software subscription fee. We're in what we call our phase 1. So we are really spent a lot of this year targeting community-based organizations, groups that actually do have an IT budget. So they are nonprofits or community organizations, but they have a budget to support tech systems like this. Believe it or not, a lot of our nonprofits and community orgs do. And so we charge an annual software subscription fee. We're live in 19 locations. Every location is paid. In addition to that annual software subscription fee, we do have a reoccurring fee per month per user that we assist. And so that's something that we put directly in front of our customers immediately during customer acquisition. Here's a cost sample and a budget. And we're really happy to say all of our sites have retained their software. We're still using them every single month from when we launched all the way till now. So that's great.
That's so fantastic to hear that. And I have my buddy joining me for a moment for the webinar. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. And can we talk a little bit deeper about the figures for a moment? What's the ballpark range for an annual software subscription? And then how much is the ballpark cost for a per user basis, if you're willing to share some of those details?
Yeah. So I want investors on the call to keep in mind we are transitioning and elevating our annual software subscription fee. But right now in this phase one, our annual software subscription fee is $500. And then the ballpark range per user per month is $30 to $60, just depending on whatever state that they're from. As we move into Q1 of 2021, we're right on target. I'm super excited because we have acquired an enterprise customer, so Comcast Military. So when we start to move into our phase two and work with corporations, we're charging $5,000 to $10,000 for the annual software subscription fee. So it definitely elevates, and that's just based on their outreach, their amount of users they're interacting with, and other goals. So having those customers in phase one definitely relates to phase two, because it's very pivotal to have enough data and success metrics to, first of all, acquire the phase two corporate customers, but also show them examples of the type of data we gather and type of impact we have on a small scale as we scale to larger markets.
Absolutely. I think that makes a bunch of sense. Congratulations on that enterprise customer. I know you've been working diligently towards that, and I'm excited that you're hitting those goals. And you mentioned Los Angeles. I was born and raised in and near Los Angeles, so I know there's a great need in LA and San Francisco. And Net Capital is headquartered in Boston, and I know this could be a great application in Boston and New York and other East Coast major cities as well. So really an exciting opportunity to expand on the 19 plus sites that you're already in Atlanta to the coast and beyond. Speaking about how big this market can be in a geographic standpoint, if you break down all the barriers, how big is the kind of community-based organization market, and how much do you think you might be able to take from that market, or how much market share?
Harold, do you
I feel like this might be a Harold one.
Yeah, that's like a Harold question.
For sure. So the total market for community-based organizations, and we did some research before, like he was saying, see how many organizations just in the US that could afford it with the IT budget. And surprisingly, there's thousands. Using GuideStar did some research. There's about around 35,000, over 35,000 organizations that could right now enlist and subscribe to Mini-City Solutions. But when you think about, you said, reducing how we're eliminating all these different barriers, Mini-City and our data resources and that tech platform can be used with, healthcare technologies, regulation, reg tech for KYC and other measures, and some analytics capabilities for even real estate planning. So doing just more research on these entire markets, we've formulated around $40 billion in total with these markets in the US, and we can approximately say about 0.01% that Mini-City can take of this entire market. So it still has the potential to be over $100 million type of organization and that type of market that we can penetrate. But even when can even grow larger with experiencing, think about these different barriers that we're exploring for cost saving solutions as well, and health and wellness appropriations for this community, that it can be even greater market for that we can penetrate and grow.
I do love hearing 0.01 of the market. I love good conservative estimates. I think that's exciting that even with those kind of manageable targets, it's really a sizable market opportunity. That's great to hear. And I know our investors appreciate this. A little housekeeping just for a moment. Please do remember that you can go directly to the link that I added into the chat. That is netcapital.com/companies/Minicity. You can push the button to register and invest there, or you can go to netcapital.com and search Mini-City, and that's another way that you can access this investment opportunity. And also, please continue to use the Q&A functionality. I want this to be as interactive as possible. That's going to be the name of the game here. So if you have any thoughts or questions, no questions are bad questions. And if it is a bad question, I'll just screen it anyways. No, please do engage. So we were talking about market size, and you were talking about as you expand into these other opportunities and cost savings. We are a fintech company at our core at Net Capital. Can you talk a little bit about what might a banking application? You talked about Comcast wanting to get involved. I really do see there's a telecom, there's a banking, there's a healthcare. A lot of it comes from municipalities or other enterprise organizations. Can we talk about the banking application here first and what they might be interested in working with Mini-City?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many opportunities, just like you said, Eric, but in terms of fintech or banking providers, we do know some of the largest EBT payment processors are fintech banking companies. The indigent population is heavily utilizing those type of features or initiatives. And so one of the major things, if anyone's in the banking space on the call or on the webinar, we know that KYC, know your customer regulations, are federally mandated, and they're super important. And so we are that innovative partner that can step in for a corporation, for a fintech bank, but in particular in the banking sector, we do provide a lot of valuable information to verify someone's identity. So not just their name, but also other metrics that verify who they are. We can provide, again, a basis for them to not only be able to, one, open an account. So we did some research for, different fintech groups or neobanks, groups that are really interesting, that are working with the disadvantaged or the underbanked or unbankable population. And what we found is that something across the board banks cannot kind of ignore is dormant accounts or not being able to open accounts. So with a large amount of this population being unbanked or underbanked, there's a huge opportunity area to make sure that they are able to open an account, verify who they are, and not have dormant accounts by simply unlocking and verifying their identification. And now we can build upon that. Of course, you don't want to have a dormant account. You want to make sure they're invested within their community, have spending power. So there's a lot of layers with those surveys that we gather about what they need, what they most are aiming for in terms of employment, their goals for the year in terms of not just, their goals for housing, but those next steps in terms of acquiring certain things or savings where we can build upon, plug into different APIs or financial literacy models. So there's a whole opportunity or wealth that we have there with our information. It's just a matter of, one, having the funding, but also having the capability to have our API plug into those third-party groups.
And Eric, I'd love to add to that, because Mini-City is really setting the foundation and working with the different technology partners to make some of these things possible. Like you were saying, there's a large, big and push initiative to get the underbanked and disenfranchised, get them banked and accounted for. But you need the tools and the authentication technology to do that. And Mini-City is doing that right now. We're partnering with different larger providers and tech providers that work with NIST 683, which is the new qualifications for identity proofing. And these are the things that DoD, Department of Defense, uses, and just recently the Department of VA and some of the larger health and bank enterprises are using to identity proof and have multi-factor authentication. We can provide some of those same capabilities within the Mini-City platform with our authorization of these actual authenticated documents, because we're getting these documents and identification resources directly from vital records offices, and we can have the team and technological capabilities to verify them and plug into these larger systems, because there are resources out there for these groups, but many times they're just siloed. But we have the capabilities with our partnerships to bring them all together so we can easily facilitate these exchanges.
I really appreciate you adding to that. And I think the banking and fintech component is incredibly important. The data applications are incredibly important. Can you tell me a little bit about, and I think really we'll want to just focus on two more pieces of the puzzle here. Let's talk about the healthcare components of this. I imagine that you might need some type of identification in order to qualify for health insurance, and that might keep you out of the emergency room, the most cost prohibitive model for taking care of our citizens. Can we talk a little bit about how Mini-City could be a cost savings for a municipality from a healthcare standpoint?
Yes, definitely. I think I can take the helm on this as well because I'm doing a lot of research for this now, and we're actually in the talks and speaking with health systems within Grady Health System and Wake Health System in North Carolina, working out some of these things as well. But it's multifaceted. You know, we can have integrations for the healthcare marketplace for people, but for our for our homeless users, those that are not insured. But what we're seeing also in some of our research and user assessments that we create are showing that many of them do have health insurance, like with Medicaid as well. So we can have on the entire platform integrations that they already have, like the developer toolkit for the healthcare marketplace. So on our system, we can have those integrations for these people already, or have integrations for them to contact brokerages to get insurance on the marketplace. But for our Medicaid providers, and the health and wellness aspect helps a lot because there's fairly insured health centers that also want to they get their resources and their funding by how many people are signed up for Medicaid and their interactions with these organizations. So if they're within our platform and within our partnership circle, they can also, you know, help robust their support and provide with our user assessment, provide better managed care for these organizations. So by using our platform, we hope to host and allow coordinated like wraparound services through the multi-agency partnerships. And with that, that can lead to lots of different savings on the healthcare aspect of things and for the municipalities themselves. And this is something we've been doing a lot of research on, particularly is the discharge planning. We've noticed that, particularly from Santa Clara County, there's a most extensive case study around homelessness. And they noticed that each homeless participant had the city a cost around $85,000 a year, 85 to $89,000 a year. And 58% of that cost was healthcare related costs. And much of it was, as you can imagine, ED, emergency departments. But if you have a coordinated care system, or many of these coordinated care system, or a partnership with shelters and medical respite organizations, because many of them do have these capabilities, and many homeless are staying in these hospitals longer and incurring more costs because they don't have the ability to go to a shelter or just, you know, not those different means. But many city has that entire platform to allow that type of integration to save the costs. And we're using that kind of the example of they study they did in Connecticut and how they've been facilitating this partnership through their community cares team. They're doing this through user assessments and doing it manually through help, but with a digital platform integrating IT tools, we can facilitate that much easier, and with a wider network as well, particularly in like rural environments in larger cities.
Oh man, wow, that's 85 to 89,000 a year, majority coming from health related implications. That is staggering. The last kind of application, since we're obviously talking about homelessness, I'd love to chat a little bit more about housing. You know, the ultimate goal is to make sure that these people are no longer homeless. Can we talk about how the transition process and how obtaining identification, how the whole mini city platform helps with the housing process?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And to put it in real time, I also connected to, of course, the pandemic and just the need for safe housing. And obviously, the homeless population is a largely elderly population. And so we know, for example, the pandemic disproportionately affects more groups that are elderly, that are aging, and that are unsheltered, don't have a safe space to go to, and those that don't have access to medical facilities. So that really paints the picture truly of our nation's homeless group. And so housing has become it's always been critical, but during a pandemic or social stressors like this, it's extremely crucial. And so what we're seeing is that what we call wellness hotels. So our nation set aside about $11 billion to generate or create these temporary housing initiatives all across the nation. And so Atlanta has some of the largest, and many city has stepped in and onboarded entire hotels. A lot of these hotels don't want to be named because, you know, just the unfortunately social stigma of having hotels kind of house you know, the indigenous population, unfortunately is not always the best received in terms of marketing or other stuff, but they really have stepped in these hotels. So many city has gone to these locations and onboarded you know, virtually, or even sometimes we'll stop by if it's a huge need. We've onboarded whole entire sites. And so this shows how critical the need is. One, because many times a citizen might have finally the monetary needs or the job to help them get their first apartment or house, but they unfortunately just don't have the ID to back up who they are. So that's really critical in getting an apartment or in a housing program. It's also really important for these different wellness centers and wellness hotels, which is what many of them are called, to stay kind of vacant, because they obviously have a huge need. Hundreds of people are coming in every day that are affected by the pandemic and whatnot. So they actually need to operate at capacity that's more open. So they really need to quickly connect people to those birth records so that they can get housing. I also want to back up a bit in terms of, and talk a bit about the types of ID and why we get birth records. A lot of times people are like, well, I don't understand. I have like my school ID or I have a photo ID. You know, this says who I am and everyone uses it. But actually, surprisingly, birth record, what we found is the strongest form of identification. It verifies your nationality as well as your birth date and your name. Just, it's a really strong form of ID. Other than a passport, which many times is financially not available to not just the homeless, but a lot of folks, a birth record is that strongest form that's going to get you housing. So we even see a lot of times people who have state IDs or school ID, but that's still not enough. You really need that birth record.
Thanks for taking that back a step to the birth record component. I think that's really important. And I know I wanted to transition after housing, but I know there's a kind of an expense for municipalities through policing as well. But maybe we can kind of pepper that in down the road, because I know you talked about just meeting the need of COVID. And I think that kind of is a testament to your progress this year. 19 paid customer sites, over 1,000 homeless citizens just from January through September of this year. Let's talk a little bit more about that progress that you've been able to accomplish. What are the things, and I know there's been some media mentions. Why don't you just tell us about some of the things that, the silver lining of 2020 of what you've been able to accomplish through MiniCity?
Well, I think during this time, we started to see a focus on a lot of social enterprises, just connecting people to what is most needed. Of course, startups are always launching really innovative and cool or delightful ideas, but because of the critical need that our nation has right now, instead of just, delightful ideas, also a focus on things that connect our nation to services and make sure we're closing disparities and gaps. So at the start of the year, MiniCity had a small pilot with the youth shelter. It went well. They became one of our first customers, and at the time, really only paid customer site. But around I think maybe it was a month or so after the start of the year, that's when we really started to see the effects of COVID. And it really took off just because there was a huge need across the Southeast and really across our nation. And so we started to enable teams. And just to give you an example, Hope Atlanta started with one location, their downtown location, which is very populated by the homeless population. But over time, they ended up spreading out to 6 locations, and we actually service 95% of their team. And so this group alone services over 17,000 homeless citizens a year. So we're having a huge outreach effect from our Metro transit services. We have a site there, one of our busiest transit locations, as well as the airport. Atlanta has the second busiest airport in the world, actually. I think Chicago here bumped us down from #1, but we have a huge need for our services there. And it's not just homeless citizens. During this time, we've actually seen, for example, at the airport, instead of just homeless citizens, we found out from their outreach team, a lot of former airport employees were now using our services just because how it's affected the tourists in transit industry. A lot of them were out of work and actually experiencing temporary homelessness. So a huge influx in customer sites. Again, we've been thankful that we've been able to keep all sites. And in terms of overall traction, beyond just the corporate enterprise partner, we also were approached for the first time by a municipality, Denver. They would like to, kickstart or see how they could do a pilot. And their actual average homelessness is 3 times the amount of Atlanta, but they were really, really impressed by what MiniCity was doing and helping us scale there. So there's always, a great amount of traction happening, but we're really seeing some concerted effort and opportunities happening as we enter Q1 of 2021. And I'm sure I'm probably forgetting some. There's been great awards that we've won this year and whatnot, but we're always more excited about the actual action of doing things. But, we've really been fortunate in terms of opportunities. Oh, and we got our first institutional investment that we signed off on just last week. So a lot of traction and progress this year.
I can speak to a little more of our partnerships and tractions, especially on the technical side. As you said, that's what I focus on. But we were recently this year accepted into the Amazon Partner Network. Amazon, we had a large national coalition meeting around a lot of organizations and CBOs, community-based organizations that are trying to solve the issue of getting ID for the homeless. And none of them were actually using and utilizing digital tools to do this. So when COVID hit down, they had a lot of issues. But we were in touch with the SVP of their policy division and GovCloud, and we're able to join the Amazon Partner Network. Spoke with a lot of them, spoke with AWS around their initiatives that they are starting to assist and help the homeless. They have a digital locker and some other things to save and help for identification and saving things digitally. So within the Amazon Partner Network, we're able to utilize some of their account managers and some of the sales services by entering the marketplace on the GovCloud. So that means we are our HIPAA and NIST security compliances are approved by AWS, and we're using their resources. So also when they're interacting with an AWS partner like a municipality or a large enterprise, we're a line item within the entire AWS bill. And what helps that sales process, they also get discounts overall on their AWS resources by purchasing into the Mini-City solution as well. So it's great to be part of that network, and it also provides tons of technical capabilities with their sandboxing and utilizing some other AI technologies for the platform and our future integrations with hospitals and banks as well. So they're really exciting 2021.
That is incredibly exciting, and the humility of the Mini-City team is overwhelming. So I'm going to go ahead and do your bidding for you. You were members of a few accelerators, including the NBC Universal, Comcast, The Farm, the Morehouse, JP Morgan Chase Ascend. That was this year, and Goody Nation Incubator, and just a few of the awards. Just starting with just this year, the Atlanta NO50 On Fire Blaze winner, and this year, Girl Boss winner. I think that might have been more geared towards India. I'm not 100% sure. And 2020 NBC Universal Comcast Startup Cohort. So some really exciting things. Again, I mentioned the silver lining of 2020, and I think that 2021 is going to continue in its upward trajectory. Thank you so much for engaging. This is actually coming from the viewers here, the potential investors. Can you please kind of expand upon the steps that it takes to establish identity? What is, especially when it comes to, I think, that birth record that you said is so strong. What do those steps look like?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So there's several use cases. So I'll give Ohio as an example. That's a state where all you need is to fill out the application. You don't even need support ID. So that's one of the perfect use cases. If all states were like that, there wouldn't be a need for Mini-City. But the truth is, every single state has a different form, a different process, and a different method for verifying ID if you don't have ID. So one of our first homeless citizens, and actually one of our oldest, he actually said, it feels like you need ID to get identification. That couldn't be more true. And the average use case of any one of us wanted to get ID, you could use a third-party vendor and just provide, your driver's license, passport. You could pretty quickly get it, or you provide information on address history, banking information, a lot of stuff that the homeless actually just do not have access to. So besides having answers to those questions, they usually do not have any other form of support ID. So the way we're able to get it is for a homeless citizen, they feel like they go to the kiosk and they fill it out in 10 minutes and then the record is released. It's like magic. But on the back end, what's happening is we're streamlining over 60 notarization and authorization forms. There's an actual process that we have to initiate after the software acquisition is signed, where we onboard every staff member. We do virtual trainings, we get their work badge, just a variety of authorization forms that we store. So we create a profile of every site, as well as every program director, and then now all the staff members under them. That is really important because we use a lot of that to create a docket or a profile on every single person. So if I were to sign up and say, hey, I'm born in North Carolina, but then we went in on the back end or even on the front end and changed it to Georgia, all the forms would, seamlessly update to include what is needed. And just to give you an example, a more difficult state, Florida, for example, it's a variety of stuff. It could be a sibling name, authorization form, any school records that you might have or may not have, a notarization form, and a variety of other things. I can't remember all for every state offhand, but for some states, it's pretty lengthy, the different forms that go into it versus, again, if it's in Ohio, it's quite straightforward. So that's kind of the process. Our system is creating just a really thorough docket so that each citizen can get a fair chance, actually not just a fair chance, a very effective and sure chance to get their birth record, and really quickly too. So just in human nature, the caseworkers, the reason why a lot of times I'll ask, what's your secret sauce? How come you're able to get it? I've been doing this for 30 years. We don't get it. And the truth is just as Harold spoke to, we did 6 months of just thorough research of contacting every single vital records office and just really relentlessly asking, what do you accept if you just have nothing at all? And then we pretty much added tech to that. So they're having to do that manually, and it could take them weeks to find out what works for one state versus our system is like a little, internal business admin doing it all at once in the blink of an eye.
I think that's super helpful to give the investors an idea of what that process looks like. And then you mentioned some hardware, some other team members. So just to be perfectly clear, you're not a hardware company. You do not create the hardware for the tablets to be able to run this process. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't create the hardware for the tablet, and that was really intentional. When we first started, we utilized like a wristband and other stuff, but we try to make it so that our software, which is preloaded onto the tablets, is very compatible with any 7 to 8 inch tablet that's on the Android system. We actually lock all of our tablets. This is really important, especially in youth shelters. They can't browse Netflix. They can't go on any little Facebook sites. All they can do is access our services. The information is encrypted as it's traveling. As Desa said, we follow the National Institute of Science and Technology standards for HIPAA compliancy, but it's pretty much a closed system. We can go and see them on our servers and connect them remotely to Wi-Fi or find out if they're charged. We get all kinds of questions. So we can do some troubleshooting with the hardware, but we don't produce any of the tablets or build them.
Perfect. And then you just train the people that are already on hand that are helping these types of populations. And then once that process is done, how quickly could you get a birth record on one of the harder states, for example, not Ohio?
Yeah. So our average is 2 to 4 weeks. It used to be 2 days to 2 weeks, but we're all about absolute transparency. The groups that we're onboarding during the pandemic, we do tell them it'll be 2 to 4 weeks just because of, the strain of the pandemic. The vital records are also addressing the pandemic needs, but we're still way faster, Eric. Our partner average is about 3 months to, if you can believe it, as long as a year to get birth records. And it doesn't mean that these caseworkers are bad people. It's just that it's really tough. It's really tough.
Wow, that's great transition from a few weeks to instead of a few months. I think that could change so many things in people's lives. Well, another question coming from the potential investor here. Could you tell us a little bit about what the competitive landscape looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Tim. In terms of competitors, we have what we call like two different groups. There's our community organizations that work like nonprofits like Crossroads, local groups that, really focus on getting ID. The way that we're different from that first group is that many of those groups focus just on our home state. And y'all can attest to this, whether you're from Georgia, New York, LA. It's very rare that you're in Georgia, New York, or LA, and you're like, where are you from? And someone says, oh, I'm from LA. It's mostly transient or someone from elsewhere. So Minicity works with every single state as well as minor territory. And that's the key differentiator between us as well as these smaller groups. They're pretty singularly focused on, just working with the home state, which leaves a lot of people out of luck when they need to get a record. Also, it's a lot slower. In terms of digital competitors, there's groups, the biggest one being VitalCheck. And they're very great. They're effective. But again, they're geared towards the average use case, the Indias, the Heralds, and the Erics who already have support ID. They ask you questions like, what's the last address you lived at, banking information, stuff that the homeless just don't have. And so especially hospitals, we found that they will utilize that. And then they're really let down because the payment's already been processed or they already started and the record will actually get stalled or stuck because the citizen is not able to answer those questions or upload support ID. So they really love the fact that we are able to work with anyone, especially if they don't have ID.
Awesome, thanks for that. And I know, Harold, you're off mute. I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, I just went on mute. Just India spoke exactly to it, but also ahead of our competitors, and one of our competitive advantage really is our grassroots level engagement with a lot of our providers, and having that really grassroots level insight on the pain points of these organizations and kind of the resources they really do need. We're really there on the ground. Just a logistical barrier of getting some of the homeless to some of these provider sites, from the smaller CBOs to even online, and just how much it cost, or even the CBOs or the caseworkers we're working with, getting them to a vital records office can be really high and increase that time of getting identification. So we're just in a very niche and sweet spot for these organizations in solving this issue.
Fantastic. And thanks again for that question. We're coming towards the end of our time here. Please continue to use the Q&A, and I'll circle back to housekeeping one more time. Do not forget that, as always, you can go to netcapital.com and invest directly into this company at the link that I provided, netcapital.com/companies/Minicity, or go to netcapital.com and search Minicity. There's a little bit more information there, as well as a chat function if you're unable to get a question out during this webinar. And so I know that you spoke about your core team, and I think it would be a disservice for our investors if we didn't talk about some of your advisors and investors that have joined your team. So can you tell us a little bit more about Kevin and Lauren and David?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really appreciative of our advisors that have been welcomed on. They're really phenomenal. David Lightburn is actually the president of Atlanta Tech Village. It's the 4th largest tech hub in our nation. So it's a great community. He offers a wealth of advice and insights into building community, building partnerships. And again, he launched Atlanta Tech Village when he was very young, and has a wealth of experience in just being a startup founder, as well as a partner and investor. Lauren Kane is actually one of the former directors at Golden Seeds, and she's also really, really pivotal. She helped us in a pitch competition. She's been a coach for us. She's helped us walk through investor strategy, and she's really keen on uplifting female founders. And so we welcomed her onto the team, and she's just been really great in helping us tighten up our business strategy and communication. Ken is actually the director for the Farm Accelerator that's powered by Comcast and NBC Universal. He's been really close to us this year, really pivotal in helping us go through pitches, different strategies, especially around fintech banking partners and the use case for health systems, just making it digestible and something that's more clearly conveyed. He's been very key in that. He also was really pivotal in helping us get the connection and launch a pilot with Comcast Military. Yeah, those are our advisors. Oh, and I'm sorry, the best for last, Kevin. He's been really great. He works really closely on the tech side. He's a 4 times CTO. He's also a fractional CTO for a number of groups, but he's heavily invested in the tech space. He's been a champion of Minicity very early on. He's one of our coaches that we were actually connected to while we're at the NBC Universal accelerator, but he's been extremely pivotal in kind of working alongside Harold in terms of stepping as a CTO or as a tech lead.
Yeah, that really does help, I think, round out the edges of the team there. Really excited that you've been able to aggregate that strong of an advisory crew. Last little bit here, and I know we wanted to focus on your core competency, which really is the ID services, and that's incredibly important. But you already begun to add on top of that in terms of employment services and referral. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to kind of take what you're doing with identification and apply that to these employment services and really kind of help support the ecosystem to be able to support themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have so many visions or ideas for future features, and we try really hard to make sure we're gathering enough information so that transition is pretty seamless. And so in the onboarding process, as Eric said, we gather enough information to create an employee profile. So it's just a voluntary step that they can take. We really encourage people to do it, especially if they're looking for a job. But essentially, our system is able to auto generate a cover letter and a resume based on whatever the homeless citizen inputs in terms of job history. So again, for them, it feels very straightforward, like they're filling out a profile, but on the back end, we're doing a number of things to export that. We do have the functionality or ability to plug into whatever recruiting agency or staffing agency. Most shelters, especially the larger ones, do have a point of contact or some type of job board. So we can plug into that pretty seamlessly. And that fits into our overall mission of not just, throwing tech at people, but making sure they're able to take those next steps with their ID and so forth.
Yeah, that's super important. Just really kind of solve the problem, not just creating a solution that kind of fits within a problem. That's very helpful. Last couple moments for people to add into the Q&A. But if not, bringing it home here, team. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what you're most excited for in 2021? And I know we have alluded to a couple of things, but just, can you tell us, on the horizon, what do you think is going to be one of the most exciting additions to the Mini-City platform?
Oof, that's quite a bit. That's excellent. But for me, it would definitely be making our technology, much more robust and able to work with these different, the platform to work with these different markets and customer segments. Now, we've gotten so much in this year, so much kind of hype from out-of-state organizations and municipalities, these organizations, hospitals. It'd be great that we're just making these steps to, our technology is having the online platform, web interfaces, API integration. We're doing this funding round to do a lot of this capabilities, and we have it pretty much already in line to really grow and integrate with a lot of these systems. So it'll be really interesting to see how we partner with them, how we connect, and I'm just really excited to get the ball rolling because we're already starting with many of them with these first talks. It's gonna be exciting to see where they lead into the first start of 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, we're always getting asked, what's next? What after ID, what's next? And so we're really excited because 2021 is really our what's next year. We're taking this wealth of data and information and ID, and we're able to implement it in a variety of areas, whether it's Comcast military or health systems. There's even some we hope you guys stay really in touch, whether you invest or otherwise, just to see what's next for us. Some things that we can't even just yet announce that is really cool in terms of data. So we're wanting to see how we can kind of make come to fruition the idea of connected cities. So whether someone's in Atlanta, Denver, Boston, wherever, they're able to really take those next steps and kind of feel like, we live up to the name of Mini-City, where you can have a home anywhere, you're not experiencing chronic homelessness, and you're not isolated.
Oh man, that inclusive message is so heartwarming, especially now. And last little bit here, that's an exciting thing about the future. Let's talk about now. Like, what is the most important thing for the investors to know? Why they should invest right now?
Yeah, I think I would love for investors to walk away with the knowledge that you're investing in something that makes our nation really reflective of a nation that's thriving, where citizens aren't just surviving, but really contributing, where we're able to close some of those disparities and gaps. We talk all the time about the economic strain, but also I think, it would give a lot back to investors to know that they're also addressing a human strain, something that's really affecting human dignity. So I'm really confident we're able to reach some of our goals. I'm impressed by our own team that we're able to really hit some of the traction. I'm sure you've heard a lot of startup founders say we anticipate this will happen, but we're really on target. We've actually exceeded a lot of our goals in terms of connecting to enterprise customers, launching with a number of sites. But if you jump on the bandwagon, you're also helping create a richer and deeper social impact, which is great.
I think that is perfect. And Harold, I'm not sure if you want to even try to follow after that, but I imagine that's probably where we should leave it. So thank you again to everybody who attended. Thank you for those who asked questions as well. Thank you so much to our panelists, India Hayes and Harold Raymond, and the entire team at Mini-City. I think it's been a very exciting proposition, and I'm so grateful to have you on the Net Capital platform. Obviously, do remember you can go to netcapital.com/companies/Mini-City and invest with a push of a couple buttons, or you can go to netcapital.com and search Mini-City, and you can invest through that way as well. So thank you so much for all of you for joining, and thank you Mini-City for allowing us to help be a small piece in your journey.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Net Capital team, and all investors.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.